The first sign that something was wrong was the silence in the third row. Elias Rowe paused with his pen hovering over the attendance sheet. "Caleb Jennings," he called, his voice calm and expectant. The other kids were rustling around in their seats, still waking up. But Caleb's spot was quiet. Elias lifted his head. The boy's desk, third row by the windows, second seat back, was empty. No backpack, no hoodie slung over the chair, no telltale signs of a rushed arrival. He waited a second, then called again. "Caleb." Still nothing. It wasn't like Caleb to be late. Elias had taught the boy for 2 years, first in 7th grade, and now again in his 8th. The kid was sharp, eager, and always 15 minutes early to class. A little shy, maybe too mature for his age, but inquisitive and kind. Elias had a soft spot for him. He reminded him of himself at that age. Bright, a little isolated, the kind of kid that teachers liked and other students barely noticed. By lunch, Caleb's absence was no longer just a curiosity. The school office was tense. Mrs. Grant, the vice principal, looked pale as she spoke hurriedly into her cell phone. Elias stood awkwardly by the copy machine, catching snippets. "Didn't come home last night." Yes, his mother said the phone was on the charger. No messages. The door to the principal's office opened, and Detective Troy Hauser stepped out. Elias recognized him instantly. Tall, broad-shouldered, mid-40s, and with a kind of clean-cut, no-nonsense demeanor that made you sit up straighter. He was a presence in Dunning, the kind of cop you didn't cross, even in a sleepy New England town like this. Elias assumed everyone would be interviewed. Standard protocol. He was the last teacher to see Caleb, after all. The boy had stayed a few minutes after class on Monday to return a borrowed copy of Mice and Men. Caleb had asked about Lenny's death, why Steinbeck wrote it that way. He'd lingered even after the bell rang, as if wanting to talk more. But then came the conversation with Hauser. "Just a few questions," Hauser had said, guiding Elias into an empty office. "You were the last known adult to speak with Caleb Jennings?" "That I know of," Elias said cautiously. "He stayed after class to talk about a book." "What time did he leave?" "About 3:25. He always walks home." Hauser nodded, jotting notes. "Did he seem upset?" "Angry?" "No, just thoughtful. Curious, as usual." Hauser looked up. "Have you ever been alone with him outside of school?" "No." "Have you ever touched him?" Elias blinked. "No, of course not." "Ever give him any gifts?" Elias hesitated. "I loaned him books. From my personal shelf." More scribbling. "Did Caleb ever mention going anywhere unusual?" "The woods, maybe." "Meeting someone?" "No, nothing like that." When Elias left the room, he noticed other teachers weren't being interviewed. Only him. By Friday, he was placed on administrative leave. The school board said it was standard procedure, pending the investigation. But the undertone was unmistakable. Within days, Dunning was whispering. Elias had lived in town for 15 years, taught at the school for 12. He had no criminal record, no blemish on his career. He lived alone in a tidy bungalow and had few close friends. Unmarried. No kids. And in the public's eye, that made him suspicious. His mailbox overflowed with letters, anonymous accusations, threats, even Bible verses about judgment. A car drove by his house one night and slowed to a crawl. A soda can hit his porch. Someone yelled, "Pedophile," before speeding off. The worst part was that he could feel it, feel the cold shift in people's eyes, the discomfort in their posture when they saw him in public. He stopped going to the grocery store, cancelled his library card, lived on canned soup and silence. But none of that compared to the growing fear in his chest. Because beneath the noise, one question gnawed at him. What happened to Caleb Jennings? The police seemed to be looking in all the wrong places. They were fixated on Elias. They searched his classroom, his home, his computer. But Elias knew Caleb. The boy wouldn't just vanish. He was bright, curious, careful. So on the 10th day of Caleb's disappearance, Elias did something foolish. He decided to find the boy himself. The first place Elias went was the edge of the forest behind the school. It wasn't much of a forest, just a few acres of thick trees and brambles, fenced off on one side and sloping down toward an old drainage creek on the other. But to middle schoolers, it was a place of myth. Elias remembered confiscating vape pens and snack wrappers after unsupervised adventures back there more than once. He knew Caleb was the kind of boy who explored alone. He didn't run with a rough crowd, but he liked being where he wasn't supposed to be, sometimes just for the quiet. The woods were darker than Elias expected. The canopy was dense, and the branches interlocked like fingers overhead. The air smelled of wet bark and dead leaves. He wore boots and carried a flashlight, though it was only 5 p.m. The early autumn sun had already started dipping behind the hills. It took him about 40 minutes of wandering, staying close to the trails, ears sharp for any sound, before he found something strange. A clearing. It wasn't large, maybe 15 feet across, but what caught his attention were the stones. Arranged in a circle, some upright like crude markers, others flat and partially buried. Around the perimeter, trees had been carved with symbols, crude spirals, triangles with slashes through them, and some kind of insect-like figure etched deep in the bark. At the center of the stone ring was a patch of disturbed soil. Elias crouched, heart thudding. Animal bones were scattered near the center. Feathers. Strings of twine. A small, rusted canister with wax drippings inside. He reached for his phone and began snapping pictures. He didn't know what he was looking at. Some kind of occult display. A prank. Kids playing at being witches. But something about it felt wrong. Deeply, viscerally wrong. He circled the clearing once more and found something half buried near one of the trees. A scrap of dark blue fabric, torn and snagged in a bramble. It looked like part of a jacket. His heart caught in his throat. He checked the tag stitched into the seam. What was left of it? Jennings. Elias staggered back, clutching the fabric in a shaking hand. He forced himself to breathe, to think. He had to bring this to the police. Detective Hauser didn't even let him in the building. Elias waited in the cold on the concrete steps of the station, holding the scrap of jacket in one hand and a USB with the clearing photos in the other. Hauser came out after 30 minutes, flanked by a younger officer with tired eyes. "You again." Hauser grunted, already exasperated. "I found something," Elias said, offering both items. This was behind the school. A clearing with bones, symbols, and this. He held up the scrap of jacket. "It's Caleb's. I'm sure of it." Hauser took the fabric and turned it over once. "You expect me to believe you just happened to stumble on this? I used to hike those woods. It's not a coincidence. Caleb told one of his friends that he found something back there. So now you're talking to witnesses?" Hauser's eyes narrowed. "You're interfering with an active investigation. I'm trying to help you find a missing kid, Elias snapped. Why are you treating me like I'm the problem? Hauser leaned in. Because you are the problem, Mr. Rowe. You're fixated. You're playing detective. You have no alibi. You gave this boy gifts. You were the last person to see him. I don't know if you're trying to cover your tracks or just losing your mind, but this ends now. Stay out of it. He turned and walked back inside, the door locking behind him with a heavy click. That night, Elias couldn't sleep. The image of the clearing kept flashing behind his eyelids, those silent stones, the symbols carved into the bark, the eerie neatness of it all. He opened his laptop and scoured the local history records, forums, and obscure Reddit threads about strange landmarks in Dunning. One comment from 6 years ago caught his attention. There's a circle in the woods behind the old school trail. Local kids used to dare each other to sleep in it. My brother saw a figure there once and refused to ever talk about it again. Cops say it's nothing, but it's not nothing. He copied the text into a document and kept digging. At 3:14 a.m., his inbox pinged with a reply to an anonymous tip he'd submitted to a local paranormal forum. A user named Blackened Roots responded, "That clearing is older than the town. The symbols are protective. If they've been disturbed, something might have been let out. The boy might have seen it." Elias read it twice. It sounded like madness. And yet, he shut the laptop and sat in the dark. Caleb had found something in those woods, and Elias was starting to believe it had found him too. The next morning, Elias woke with a single, unbearable truth gnawing at his chest. No one else was going to find Caleb. The town had turned its back. The school had erased his presence. The police were fixated on the wrong man. Even the news cycle had moved on, another headline buried under football scores and budget reports. So Elias went back into the woods. This time he came prepared. A flashlight, a thermos of coffee, gloves, a folding knife, and the half-shredded piece of Caleb's jacket. He traced his steps carefully, moving through the thinning mist of early dawn, his breath steaming in front of him. When he reached the clearing again, the first thing he noticed was that it had changed. The stones were rearranged. Some had been turned on their sides, others removed entirely. One sat cracked in half, like it had been struck with a hammer. The symbols carved into the bark of the surrounding trees had been slashed over, angrily, hastily, like someone wanted them gone. Someone, or something, had defaced it. Elias scanned the area, muscles tensed, heart pounding in his ears. That's when he saw it. Behind the easternmost tree, half concealed beneath dead vines and leaves, was a hole, a narrow dirt tunnel about 3 feet wide, just big enough for a person to crawl through. Its mouth was rimmed with more of the crude etchings. The earth around it was freshly disturbed. He dropped to his knees and aimed his flashlight inside. The beam cut through the gloom, revealing a passage that snaked downward and curved out of sight. Damp air exhaled from its depths, foul and metallic. Elias's gut clenched. He thought of turning back, calling someone, telling the police again, even if they didn't believe him. But then he saw the footprint. Small, left shoe, embedded in the mud just inside the tunnel. A child's footprint. Caleb. Elias didn't hesitate. The crawl space was claustrophobic. Wet roots brushed his shoulders as he moved, elbow to elbow, on his stomach. His breath echoed too loudly in the confined space. Earth pressed against his back. Occasionally, he had to twist to avoid splintered roots or sharp rocks. After what felt like 10 minutes, though he couldn't be sure, he came to a wider space where he could crouch. His flashlight flickered once, then held steady. The chamber before him looked built, not natural. 4 timber posts reinforced the corners, rotted with age. A flat stone slab sat in the center, with dried brown stains crusted along its sides. Chains bolted into the wall rattled slightly in the draught. And in one corner, movement. A figure. Elias aimed the beam, and his breath caught. Caleb! The boy flinched and pulled back. His face was pale, dirty, streaked with tears. His clothes were torn. But his eyes, those eyes he'd seen 100 times in class, were unmistakable. "Mr. Rowe," Caleb whispered, hoarse. You came." Elias rushed over, hands shaking as he examined the restraints around the boy's ankle. A rusted shackle, bolted to the wall. He pulled out his knife and pried at it, but the lock held tight. "Who did this to you?" Elias asked. "Who brought you here?" Caleb looked past him, eyes wide with fear. "He's still here." Elias froze. "Who?" A voice spoke from the darkness behind them. "Why are you down here, Mr. Rowe?" Elias turned slowly. A figure stepped from the shadowed corridor. Thin, dressed in grey coveralls. A janitor's keyring jingled softly from his belt. It was Mr. Crane, the school's old custodian. His expression was unreadable, somewhere between sorrow and detachment. "He was curious," Crane said, "kept following me, wanted to know what was in the woods. So I showed him." "You kidnapped a child," Elias said, standing protectively in front of Caleb. "I didn't take him," Crane said, voice low. "I just opened the door. This place, it called to him. You're sick." Crane tilted his head. "No, I'm awake." Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a long, rusted crowbar. Elias stepped back, heart hammering. He looked down. The shackle. No time to break it. So he did the only thing he could. He threw his flashlight at Crane's face. It struck with a crack. The light clattered to the ground. Elias grabbed Caleb, lifted him, ignoring the weight, and ran into the tunnel behind them. Darkness swallowed them. They ran blindly, guided only by feel and memory. Roots clawed at their feet. At some point, Elias tripped and fell, slicing his arm on a jagged stone. Caleb cried out but kept going, dragging Elias to his feet. Behind them, Crane's voice echoed, soft, nearly mournful. "You shouldn't have come, Elias. You shouldn't have come." Eventually, a thin sliver of light appeared ahead. The tunnel narrowed, curved, and spat them out into the early morning woods. They stumbled through the underbrush, gasping wild-eyed, until they hit the trail. Only then did Elias collapse. And for the first time in 11 days, Caleb Jennings wept freely in the arms of someone who had come for him. The hospital lights were too bright. Elias sat in the hallway outside Caleb's room, his clothes filthy and blood-streaked, his arm wrapped in gauze. 2 state troopers stood near the entrance. A nurse had offered him water and a blanket, but he'd refused both. He could still feel the dirt of that tunnel under his nails, still smell the rot and old stone. Caleb was safe now. Alive. Medically stable, the doctors said. Malnourished, dehydrated, bruised but intact. But he didn't speak much. Not yet. The psychologist would visit him tomorrow. Right now, Elias just wanted to know one thing: why no one had been looking in the right place. Why no one listened to him until it was almost too late. Detective Hauser arrived around 7 a.m. His shirt was rumpled, his jaw shadowed with stubble. He looked Elias over once, then took the seat beside him without speaking. "You were right," Hauser said after a long silence. "No," Elias said hoarsely. "I was desperate. There's a difference. We've arrested the janitor, Crane. Found evidence in his apartment tying him to the tunnel. Keys, chains, one of Caleb's notebooks. But he's not making sense. Keeps talking about how he opened a door and served something older than roots." Elias didn't respond. "I'm sorry we didn't listen sooner," Hauser added quietly. Elias closed his eyes. "I don't care about apologies. I care about that boy." Hauser nodded. "We sealed the tunnel this morning. Cemented the entrance. Forensics will be down there for weeks, probably. It goes deeper than we thought. Branches off. Some sections look ancient, like someone's been digging for years." "It wasn't just him," Elias murmured. "What?" "There's something else down there. Or was." He met Hauser's gaze. "Did you find the circle?" "In the clearing." Hauser hesitated. It was gone, like someone had removed everything. Stones, markings, all of it. "We found disturbed soil and impressions, but no proof." Elias wasn't surprised. That place didn't want to be found. It let itself be seen, for Caleb, and then for him. And now it was gone. Hauser sighed. "The press is going to tear this apart. They'll want to know why the boy was missed for so long. Why no one checked the woods properly. Why you were treated the way you were. I don't care what the press says." "Well," Hauser said, rising, "you should at least know you're cleared. Officially. The school board was informed this morning." Elias stared at the floor. "I'm not going back." "Didn't think so." He visited Caleb 3 days later, after the boy finally asked for him. The room was quiet except for the beeping monitor and the soft rustle of 4 tubing. Caleb looked small in the hospital bed, but more alert. When he saw Elias, he managed a tired smile. "I knew you'd come," he whispered. Elias sat down beside him, forcing back the tightness in his throat. "I didn't know if I'd be in time." "You were." They sat like that for a while, the silence between them thick with shared memory. Eventually, Caleb asked the question Elias had dreaded. "What was that place?" Elias took a long breath. "I don't know. But you felt it too, didn't you?" He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I did." Caleb's hands fidgeted on the blanket. It wanted something. Elias didn't answer, because he knew the truth, even if he couldn't explain it. That whatever had been lurking in that hidden tunnel, whatever darkness Crane had fed with old fears and symbols, it wasn't just madness. It was ancient, patient, hungry, and now it was sleeping again. For now. Elias left Dunning the following week. He didn't wait for the school's reinstatement letter or the court's formal exoneration. The town was still split. Some hailed him as a hero, others couldn't look at him without flinching. The damage was done, the trust broken. He moved north, to a small town where no one knew his name. He found work cataloguing rare books at a regional library. Quiet, slow, predictable. Just the way he needed. He kept one photograph on his desk. Caleb, from the yearbook, smiling faintly beneath a mop of uncombed hair. Once a month, A letter arrived from Dunning. Sometimes it was typed, sometimes scrawled in pencil. Caleb's voice came through clearer with each one. Sometimes he mentioned the dreams, of tunnels, of flickering lights, of someone whispering just out of sight. Sometimes Elias had those dreams too, but neither of them ever mentioned the clearing, or the symbols, or the faint scratching he still sometimes heard on windy nights. He just wrote back and said, "I'm proud of you. Keep going. Keep growing." And he meant it, because sometimes surviving was the bravest thing you could do.